Good morning and welcome to our final session of the 8th Annual Building Bridges Dual Credit Conference. I'm Tony Vadillo and I have the pleasure of serving as Dean of Dual Credit and Early College High Schools at EPCC, but today I'm this session's moderator. With me are Lorena Gonzalez, making sure our technology works well, and Sue Selk, monitoring the chat. We kindly ask that you keep your mics muted to preserve bandwidth. Please keep in mind this session will be recorded. Feel free to post your questions in the chat box. We will ask our presenter to address questions at the end of the session. For EPCC faculty development credit, we will post the sign-in sheet in the chat box. You will sign in with your EPCC login credentials. The full list of attendees will be downloadable from Teams for anyone without EPCC login credentials. If you have attended a previous session, you don't have to sign in again. We will also post the session evaluation in the chat box towards the end of this workshop. I am pleased to introduce our keynote speaker today, Dr. David R. Troutman. He is the Associate Vice Chancellor and Chief Data Officer of Institutional Research and Advanced Analytics for the Office of Institutional Research and Analysis, OIRA, at the University of Texas System. In this role, Dr. Troutman and his team of researchers and business intelligence analysts transform data into timely and meaningful information in order to support UT system initiatives and policy decisions across its 13 institutions and to enhance insight, transparency, and accountability. Their work promotes continuous improvement and institutional analytics through effective institutional research, data analysis, consulting, and facilitation efforts, collaborating with UT system institutions, federal and state agencies, and higher education associations and foundations to transform data into actionable information. Most notably, Dr. Troutman partners with the United States Census Bureau to obtain national wage data for all UT system graduates. This data is presented through SeekUT, a free online tool that provides post-graduation outcomes of UT system graduates by program of study. He also oversees the development and implementation of the UT System Dashboard, a web-based business intelligence system that provides analytics for policy decisions and measures productivity and accountability in higher education. Dr. Troutman's work has been featured in peer-reviewed journals and various media outlets. He earned his Ph.D. in Human Development and Family Studies from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. In his session, examining the impact of dual credit on educational and workforce outcomes, he will give us a statewide perspective of the important work that we do in support of dual credit. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Dr. Troutman.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much for inviting me today so that I could talk about the journey that I've gone through over the last few years with examining the benefits of dual credit and what's happening in the state of Texas and also what's happening at the University of Texas System. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And over the next hour, we're really going to go through a journey of, like I'd mentioned, the research that I've done to really examine and highlight and lift up the benefits of dual credit. So let me go ahead and share okay. So let me go to the next slide. So what I wanted to do first is really just talk about sort of the statewide perspective on the number of dual credit students in Texas. It's pretty phenomenal with the rapid growth that has taken place. So as early as 1999, there were very few students participating in dual credit. And as of we hit our peak in 2019, where you had more than 200,000 Texans enrolled in dual credit. I would think that we probably have one of the highest enrollment rates of dual credit across the nation. So that's kudos to everyone on this call today. And but I did want to point out, just so that you're aware, based off the last reporting of fall 2020 during the pandemic, we did see a drop off of more than 20,000 students who did not enroll in dual credit. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention so that you're aware of that. Of that 20,000 students of drop off, 65% of those students were Hispanic students. So I always want to make sure that we have an equity lens associated with any type of data that we present so that you're aware of what's happening, for Hispanic students, African American students, and Asian American white and others. So I just wanted you to be aware of that.
Excuse me, Dr. Troutman. I'm
Yes.
sorry, you might be sharing the wrong screen. We have the presenter view.
Oh, that's not good. Thank you for telling me that. Let me try that again. I should be able to do this after 18 months of being in isolation. Let me try it one more time.
It happens to all of us.
Okay, now.
There we go. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you so much for telling me that. I appreciate that. And so you'll see a much larger screen now of a chart of providing the numbers by race, ethnicity, and really highlighting the fact that it's demonstrating that Hispanic students are the highest number of students who are actually participating in dual credit in Texas, and then whites, and then African American and Asian thereafter. And so what we'll do over the next hour is we'll talk about how we explored the data to really understand the occurrences of what's happening in Texas. We're also going to talk about how dual credit will create a momentum point or success factor for students who go on to strive towards a four-year degree. We'll also, I had the opportunity to do a mixed methods approach. So we have both quantitative and qualitative data. And so I've had the opportunity to meet with several students. I think it's close to almost 200 students, and just asking them about their experiences with dual credit. And we'll talk about that. And then thereafter, we'll move and have a conversation about what happens to dual credit students after they graduate. Where do they go in the workforce? What types of industries are they going into, and how much are they making? And so that's what we'll be spending our time today. And I just wanted to know, if you do have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll allocate some time so we can try to do our best to answer those questions you might have. So I did want to first talk about the study that we had produced. We produced this in 2018. We're planning on replicating this study in the next 2 years. So we'll be going out back to the campuses and back and talking to students. But really what we wanted to do is to better understand the relationship between dual credit participation and during high school and their outcomes once they matriculate to our UT system academic institutions. And I wanted to be very thoughtful with this and really understand and produce, sort of examine a data discovery aspect of this so that we could capture the data that we needed, both quantitative and qualitative. I really wanted to capture the student voices, and I think I did, and then really understand policies and program review. And the full report you can find at data.utsystem.edu. So moving beyond college success, and then after we discuss the study, we'll go into a conversation describing what happens to students after they receive a degree. Do students who participate in accelerated programs, are they more likely than students who do not to go in to continue their education after graduating with a bachelor's degree? And then we'll talk about how much do graduates who participate in these accelerated programs earn first year and third year out after graduation. And then we'll also talk about the types of industries that graduates are working in. So I think it'll be a really interesting conversation. And so our foundational data sources that we use are from the coordinating board, so our state reporting data. I have a collaboration with the Texas Workforce Commission, so at any time one of our students steps foot on our campus, I can actually match their data with the TWC data to really understand earnings data. And then I also have a U.S. Census Bureau relationship so that we can accurately identify earnings across the nation for our students. And then lastly, we use the National Student Clearinghouse to track students to see if they continue on with their education and just the patterns of their education. So the first thing I want to talk about is the quantitative analysis that we use with using administrative data. And so with that information, what we try to examine for those who would matriculate into our system what does it look like? How many credit hours are they taking? How does that differ by race, ethnicity? And what does it look like with SAT scores and other types of scores? And what we found is that we didn't see over time with the number of students coming to the UT system institutions, we didn't see a dramatic increase in the number of dual credit hours students are bringing with them. It's around 12 to 18 for the majority of the students. However, what we did see over time, when you look at the top 10% of students taking dual credit, we saw that the number of hours that they've increased over time, just even 7 years ago was around 33 hours, and currently not the 90th percentile, so 10% of students are bringing in 60 hours. And that really is related to the early college high school experiences that Texans are experiencing while they're in high school. We also found that African American and Hispanic students are more likely to take dual credit as compared to whites or Asians, and whites and Asian students are more likely to take AP only credit. And then also when you think about SAT scores, we do see that about a third of the students who scored less than 1100 took dual credit only, whereas about 8% took AP only, and then 5% took both. This both category we'll talk about in just a second. It's a really interesting concept where people are receiving multiple types of experiences in high school, and we're finding that it's really benefiting students to have these different perspectives and different experiences, both taking both AP and dual credit. Because I know there has been sort of a productive tension between offering dual credit versus AP, and we'll get into the heads of the minds of students and really their perspectives on why they're taking AP versus dual credit or dual credit versus AP in just a second. So I think what we did find in the study, so I'll take a step back for just a second. We followed students over time and we really examined whether or not they were successful in both retention and graduation. We've heard from some of the tenured faculty at our UT system institutions where they were very hesitant about dual credit. They were coming to me and they were giving me anecdotal information about whether or not students were successful if they took dual credit and then went to our institutions to strive towards that 4-year degree. And so I said, well, let's take a step back and look at the data and let's see what the data are telling us. And so what this graph on the right is showing you, so the X's are dual credit students. Triangles are AP IB credit students. And then the circles, the gray circles, are students who took both AP and dual credit during high school. And what we did is we followed those students and we did a regression, an analysis to see the likelihood of being retained your second fall, your third fall, your fourth fall, and then 4-year graduation, 5-year graduation, 6-year graduation. And the exciting thing about this is that it's really demonstrating, so we'll take the X from second fall enrollment. What we see from that data point is we can say that dual credit students are 2 times more likely to be retained as compared to students who did not participate in dual credit at their high school. And so we have this treatment effect to really understand the impact of dual credit on the success of students. And so this is all quantitatively. We'll get into the qualitative aspect or the student voice on why that might be happening, but I think it's important to highlight that. What we see with second fall retention is that AP, they're about 3 times more likely to be successful as compared to those who did not participate in dual credit. And then with the both categories, so students who took both dual credit and AP are more than 5 times more likely to be retained their second fall. So to put that in perspective, that's more than a 500% increase in the likelihood of someone taking both experiences in high school and being retained in college their second fall. And what's interesting is the third fall retention and the fourth fall retention are pretty stable when it comes to the likelihood of being retained. We do see that There are very few differences between, and this is what's interesting also, during both the third and the fourth year fall and retention rates, there are very few differences between AP and IB versus dual credit. And there, like I said, there's always been this productive tension between which is better, which is going to provide, students the ability to strive towards that degree. And what this study is showing you is that they both benefit, and there shouldn't be an argument, and that we should be providing opportunities of all types for students so that they are ensured, this sort of momentum point that I talk about when they go into a four-year institution. And then I think also to highlight is the four-year graduation rates. It's really interesting to find that there are very few differences between AP, IB, and dual credit students and the likelihood of graduating in 4 years. However, you see that both categories always set apart, which is always interested me. And I think there's further studies that need to be done to really understand that combination of factors of both. But I think for this study, it's really demonstrating that there are a few differences between AP, IB, and dual credit. And then this was just, so that analysis is really just understanding the whether or not you took it or you didn't take it. Then we really want to understand the number of hours that students are experiencing and how those number of hours might be impacting the overall success of students. And what we found is that it's more important to expose students to completing successfully one course as compared to 60 hours. And let me put some context around that. What we found that there were very few differences or statistical differences between the likelihood of being retained among students who had 1 to 15 dual credit hours, 16 to 30, or 31 to 59 dual credit hours. We did see that students with 60 hours are more likely to be retained. And then what we did find is that students who had 16 to 30 hours there's a greater likelihood to graduate as compared to students who had 1 to 15 hours. We saw that students with 60 hours are 5 times more likely to graduate in 4 years than students who had 1 to 15 hours. So we did see that, and it's sort of counterintuitive. You would think that there would be a relationship between retention and graduation, but we'll talk about that in just a second about the students' experiences and how they're navigating the institutions with those number of hours. But we do see that it's helping facilitate a much faster time to degree when those students do receive 60 hours versus 1 to 15 hours. And like I said just a second ago, is it does shorten the time to degree. So what we do see is that those 1 to 15 credit hours don't really save the time. It's really when you get in the upper hours of 60 hours, 31 to 59 hours, where we do see that students are saving 2 to 3 semesters towards that degree. And I think that will relate with debt and cost in just a second. And we'll also drill down and understand from a student's perspective why they're taking advantage of this to save money and to help their families. And the other thing that we did is we really wanted to understand what's happening to students if they're taking pre-calculus and then looking at the subsequent course completion at the institution. So what we did, and this is a table that really shows you students who had taken pre-calculus, and then we followed them to calculus 1. And so it's showing you that students who had taken dual credit received 82% of them received an A, B, or C grade level in calculus 1. Whereas students who had previous math experiences at that institution, so at the 4-year institution, there really were no differences. So the 81 or 82.1% for dual credit students versus if a student took math courses at the institution, it's similar rates. We do see that AP, IB perform a little bit better, but it's still fantastic to have that high of a pass rate in Calculus 1. And typically we see that Calculus 1 has the highest D's, F's, and W's associated with four-year students. So it's showing you the benefits that dual credit is setting students up for success to take those tougher courses that typically have high DFW rates. And then another thing that we also examine is the grade point averages at both the first, second, and third years of the educational experience once they came to us. And so on average, the first year GPA is around a 2.0 when you look at across the entire population. But what we do see with those first year GPAs is that there is an average around a 2.4 or when rounding errors is a 2.5 and a 2.4, and understanding that students are doing well while they're going to college, keeping in mind that your first year GPA in a four-year institution is always your lowest GPA, and then after you've been able to tackle that first year, you do have a springboard of your GPA goes much higher. And we can start seeing that with the second year GPA, where the average is a 2.4. And once again, dual credit students are averaging a 2.6. So that's fantastic. And once again, that's an average. So there's a distribution that takes place, and there are students who are receiving a higher GPA, but that sort of just places it in context. And once again, we see that both categories, so students who take in both dual credit and AP, have a higher GPA overall across all groups. And then the last thing that we really wanted to understand is how is it impacting debt? So when we look at the overall student loan debt, we want to ensure that we're lowering that amount of debt. And one of the benefits or one of the advantages is making sure that dual credit is affordable for students. There's a variety of different patterns across the state of Texas on how dual credit's being paid for. Some students receive it free. Some students receive stipends that cover both books as well. And then some students are paying $200 to $400 a class. It just depends on the district that you're in. And so what we see here, so this is a chart. What we did is we looked at the average student loan debt for a group. And so it's around $18,000 for all students. And then we followed it to see if there were any statistical differences between students who had 1 to 15 hours of dual credit, 16 to 30, 31 to 59, and 60 plus the dual credit hours. And what we found is that of those students who graduate in 4 years, within 4 years, we see that only the group that had 60 hours save around $4,000 in debt. So ultimately, they're leaving with around $14,000 worth of debt. Keeping in mind that this is only those students who leave with debt. Across our system, we have around 48% of our students who graduate from our colleges and universities that don't leave with any debt. So that's something to also point out. And then what we see with those graduated in 5 years, we do see that the students who had 60 hours save around $5,100 in overall debt versus about $1,500 for those who have 31 to 59. And we'll talk about why that might be, that a number of hours might not be impacting if it's only 1 to 15 or 16 to 30. And I think this is really the heart of the matter, is really understanding the student voices through what we've done with an online survey and focus groups. And so that will help sort of put meat to the bones for the quantitative data that we've presented, so you can understand and get in the minds of students to really figure out what's happening and their thoughts about dual credit and their experiences. And so what we did is we actually did an online survey that was sent to students prior to the campus visit so that we could talk to them about their experiences. And it was any student who entered in with AP, IB, or dual credit. And we had a 21 question survey. And then we asked about the types of credit they received, the mode of deliveries, the recruitment, the cost. And once again, all the results of these survey results are within the report on the website that I gave you earlier. And then lastly, during the open-ended, for the 21 question survey, I did have a last question of an open-ended. I thought, wouldn't it be nice if I just had an open-ended to talk about them giving advice to high school students? And so what's great about that, I thought, well, it would be great if they answer that, but a lot of students might not want to. And so I said, well, why not? It's not going to hurt anything. And so what we ended up having is about over 4,000 students completed the survey. And it ranged from campuses from 5% or 20% response rates, with average of about 13%, which is, decent based on it's an online survey for students. But what was most fascinating with the open-ended question about asking for advice to provide to high school students, those who completed the survey, 80% of the students completed the open-ended question. I was floored by that. Typically, that doesn't happen. And I think one of the reasons why it did happen is that students wanted their voices to be heard. And and some of the students provided passages, and because I didn't limit the characters on the number of words that someone could use, which, I guess was a double-edged sword, because it was amazing to see how the students articulated their thoughts and opinions and really wanting to provide advice to high school students about selecting courses in preparation for college once they transition, but sort of preparation for dual credit courses. So it was amazing to see that. And then thereafter we did a campus visits where we did focus groups with students and other administration. And then we just tried to find times for focus groups with students. So it was a mixed group of individuals, of dual credit students or AP or separate. There were typically 8 to 10 students in the questions, and we really tried to understand their experiences in their own words. And ultimately, I spoke to 181 students across our campuses, 90 faculty, 45 admissions, and then 96 advisors. It really provided hundreds of pages of transcripts that we went through and really tried to identify the themes associated with the conversations we had with students. And so based on the perspective of the online survey, I did ask them, in your experience, how would dual credit courses prepare you for traditional college courses at your current institution? And what's exciting to see here is that less than 10% of the students who responded to this said that dual credit courses did not prepare them well. I think that's fantastic, because typically what you can see in online surveys is that you're more likely to have a chance where students who had negative experiences with something respond to a survey versus students who had positive experiences responding to a survey. So that survey response. But in this, it's a flip. It's showing that almost 90% of our students who responded said that dual credit courses prepared them somewhat or prepared them well for college. So it's really just highlighting the fact that you all are preparing our students to be successful once they go to a four-year institution. And then the other thing that we asked them about is really understanding their dual credit experiences to the following questions. So I developed more realistic expectations about college. I was more confident about my ability to succeed in college. I improved my time management skill, and I was prepared to take on more challenging college courses. And what we see here is that for the more realistic expectations about college, we do see the majority of the students saying they agree or strongly agree to that statement, which is that's a great thing. And only about 11% said that it didn't. Versus the confidence aspect of the ability to succeed, we see another that's more than 2/3 of them are saying that it's helping them be confident as they're pursuing a college degree. The time management is a little bit lower, but I would beg the question of, I think that we all are continually, not just young adults, working on time management skills and how to improve them, but the fact that 40-something% told us that this dual credit experience helped them with time management skills was a huge benefit for them. And then we also saw that more than 60% of students said that they could take on more challenging courses after going through a dual credit experience. So really, once again, it just shows you the value of working with you all as they're going through and taking dual credit courses so that they can be prepared for college. And then some other advantages they listed out. We had sort of a laundry list of items that they could select from and ask them to choose all that apply. And what we can see is that the number one reason why they view why dual credit is an advantage is its financial and time savings. That was the number one thing on their mind. The other thing is to get exposure to college level courses expectations while in high school was number two. And we'll talk about what that means in just a second, because we had some conversations with students, so they used their own words to describe what that meant to them. And then the other thing is sort of increasing the academic challenge while in high school. When we were talking to students in the focus groups, they said, honestly, I'm bored. Like I needed a challenge. I needed more. And dual credit provided that experience for me. And then the other thing that's interesting, only 2% of the entire 4,000 students said that it didn't benefit them. So very, very low percentage of students. And then what we see about the disadvantages, then that's a little bit more a mixed bag, where we do see that, 1 out of every 5 students said that they were concerned about credit loss. So did the courses, were they accepted by the university but not applied to the degree plan? And so that was something that was troubling to them. And then 45% said there really were no disadvantages. So it was is an interesting take on that. And then there was various groups of students who talked about sort of lack of rigor or quality in the dual credit course. And once again, we'll talk about that in just a second, because that came up during our focus groups to really understand the differences of experiences that are taking place for our students who experience dual credit in high school. And so the overview of this is that there's a wide variation of experiences that are taking place across the state of Texas. And there's also different motivations for taking dual credit. And then there are advantages, but also disadvantages at the same time. And so what we'll do now is really understand and use the student words to highlight what's happening or what they're thinking about. And one thing I did want to note is I was fascinated by, so we went to all 8 academic institutions in the UT system, and each institution was almost like, when I was talking to students, it was very Groundhog Day. All the same themes were coming up over and over again. So it's universal across our institutions, so really about the experiences that students are taking place. And so one thing I wanted to show with the wide range of variation of experiences, so this transcript is taken literally from one focus group. So I would ask them about their overall impressions of dual credit courses that they took and how it compared to what they were expecting. And so this is a dialogue between 3 students of about 10 students in a focus group. And it was fascinating to see their different experiences. So student 1 said, I guess taking dual credit in high school, it was like a suck-off class, honestly. It was really lenient. We got a lot of curves. When we came to college, we had to learn on our own also. There are no curves. It was more set compared to high school, where it was more flexible, if that makes sense. And then what's interesting is a student countered and said, I felt mine was better than that, in the sense that I had a mixture of high school and college, and I had reviews that were still fill out tests. You don't get that in college, but at the same time, there was still, you had to go and do this on your own to learn before you got to class, kind of thing. And then another student said, I think it was a really good experience because I prepared me for college, because they treated us as if we were already college students. So when I transitioned to college, I felt as if my dual credit classes, because I was more independent, like how it is in college. So it was really interesting to see the differences in perspectives just in that one focus group. And we saw those counter arguments during the entire time we were having these focus groups across the 8 academic institutions. One thing that for motivations that really came up with every student we talked about, students said, I want to save money and time. And they said they want to save money and time because they don't want to be several students talked about how they did not want to be a burden on their family. And they were using this as an advantage to help their family, so that when they did go and transition to a 4-year campus, they called them knocking out courses. They just want to knock out the courses so they can get to their major, get into that major, have a degree, and so they can help go into the workforce and help family. And we saw that over and over again. Another motivation was just seeking learning or preparation. They talked about in the focus groups about how to read a syllabus, understanding a bursar, understanding what a registrar is, just the lingo and terms that higher education uses that is foreign to individuals. Dual credit creates an experience where it becomes non-foreign to them and it becomes very native to them. And then the other thing that kept on coming up is, well, I want a competitive advantage when I apply to college. I want to show that I have a higher GPA. I want to show that I'm prepared. And so that's always on their mind when they're thinking about motivations. And so here are just a couple of quotes. And once again, after this presentation will be shared with everyone so you can have access to this. But really it's seeking a learning and prep versus knocking out. So the knocking out part was, why focus 6 hours of my coursework here on a subject that I could just get out of my way at a less of a price? It would just give me freedom here at the university to take what I want. And so it creates that sort of agility or agency for students.
Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Oh, okay. And then in different experiences with time and money, here's some quotes that highlight, I quoted them as sort of full speed ahead. Some students said I was able to graduate a year early thanks to all the credits. College classes are expensive. Any investment toward earning a degree that can be done during school is worth it. Versus some students said, let's proceed with caution. One student said, I wish I had taken rigorous courses in high school and it didn't end up saving me any money. And then others considered whether a traditional college experience or what you get out of college as quickly as possible. Finishing university early helps save money and prepares you ahead of time, but taking too many classes forces you to go through university much quicker and doesn't really let you explore much of your options. So it's sort of thinking about this balance between saving money and going too quickly through your college experience. And then other students talked about college or not during high school. So some students cited exposure to college content, expectations and processes, versus some students said that dual credit and AP aren't the same. So there's sort of that tug of war that takes place. Some students talked about the increased preparation or exposure. So one student said, AP and dual credits not only saved me time and money once I got to college, but it prepared me for the work required for college. So college coursework was easy for me after high school. It really set that stage to understand time management, the content needed, reading a syllabus, meeting deadlines. And so some students said I would advise them to take AP or dual credit courses to save time and money when they reach college. Depending on the teachers, these courses can also prepare you for the university workload and expectations. Even if you have to take the course again in college, at least you have a background knowledge from these classes to help you do well in the intro college courses. So for example, some students talked about physics and how they would take physics as dual credit, and then they would retake that physics course later on, so they had a really strong foundation, and so they could perform well in a class. On the flip side, some students said it's not the same. So for some, this is meant as an advice against dual credit or AP altogether. One student said, do not take them. It's a waste of time and it doesn't prepare you for all the actual university level. I'm over here struggling because the dual credit courses I took were super watered down. And for others, it was really, you're going to learn a lot in AP and dual credit course that you didn't already know. However, you're going to get to college and learn even more. So high school will always be high school and college will always be college. They work differently. The time and money savings are worth it. So it's sort of this tension, this tug of war that takes place when students are experiencing this. And this really gets back down to sort of the quality of the experience that students have and how that varies across the state of Texas. And keep in mind that we met with a variety of students across the entire state. And so I think that's why we get those perspectives. But I think one thing that's really interesting with the findings that we found is that it's related to flexibility and how dual credit can provide flexibility for students. And so students were saying that it had the ability to take less hours per semester. So you actually had some buffer. So let's say you come in with 30 hours, we can buffer it so that you don't have to take 15, but maybe 12. Some students talked about the ability to add a major or additional minor or even a third major sometimes. Very overachieving students. I was struggling with just selecting one major when I went to college. So these students are talking about, 2 majors, even a third major. And then other students talked about the increased time and opportunity to explore interest in majors. So they knew that they had this bank of credit hours that applied to their degree plan, then they could be more flexible about their journey. And so it provided access to other opportunities like research opportunities, assistantships, and even honors colleges for these students. So it created that sort of great flexibility for students. And then we also see that there's some unintended consequences as it relates to hours. So here's just a sort of bucketed of greater opportunity and then unintended consequences associated with that. So like I said previously, more time to explore majors, adding majors, tailoring schedules. But then we also heard from students that said, if I go in with too many hours, I had less time to explore majors, and that I had to add unintended minors to my plan because I have to meet the 12 hours to meet for financial aid awards. And then they also said that sometimes it's just scheduling constraints. The timing, some programs are very structured. And so there's a timing at which those courses are offered. And if you've already taken that course, it throws the timing off. And so they had to work more closely with their academic advisors to understand that timing. And then also some students said that I finished my coursework too quickly and I wasn't ready for my summer internships. I wasn't ready for research. So like I said, this sort of this dichotomy of this tug of war was happening. And so this is just some quotes, just so that you understand sort of the flexibility and how they described them. So one student said, I started at UT with 55 hours. It allows me to take a low number of hours, like 12 hours a semester, and keep my GPA high. And I still graduate in 4 years. I'm able to participate in activities on campus, have internships, and enjoy college. Because of my dual credit and AP classes, I'm more prepared and less stressed. And then other students talked about seeking balance and managing stress. They felt overwhelmed by taking all this college credit and they felt like they didn't have a true college experience. So some students said, don't rush high school or college. Don't take more than you can handle and try to seek balance between coursework and other experiences. So try to have that happy medium. And once again, here's some quotes, but due to time, I'll skip through those too, but definitely we'll be able to share those with you. And so ultimately, just navigating the choices of dual credit and AP, students always try to compare and contrast, but the majority prefer dual credit. And the reason why they prefer dual credit is that the credit wasn't contingent on just one AP test, that it was based on your performance, your interactions with the faculty, and your learning outcomes as the semester transpired versus just taking one AP exam to see whether or not you got a 3 or higher. And so other navigating choices, just real quickly, if you take AP, students said, well, I take AP if I want to leave the state of Texas. If I want to think about math and science, there's a major interest. Dual credit, students said, stay in the state, it will transfer, but trying to find a balance between the two. Other students said, consider the GPA weighting because there are differences on how superintendents weight that. So that's on their mind and they're aware of that. So I did want to sort of jump ahead and talk about here's just all the different advantages and cautions. Once again, we'll share that with you. But I did want to highlight sort of moving beyond college success. I think this is an opportunity for us to, declare dual credit benefits students. We know this. We can continue studying it, but we need to acknowledge it and move on to think about what's happening after college and really understanding what's happening to students after they left us. So what I did was I took a cohort of students for a given year and I followed them over time. So they either took dual credit, AP, or both. And I wanted to understand what happened to them. So there were 3 questions that framed that out. Do students who participate in accelerated programs, are they more likely than students who do not participate in accelerated programs to continue their education after graduation? So do they go to graduate school? Do they continue and receive additional credentials? And the second question is, how much do graduates who participate in these accelerated programs earn 1, 3, and 5 years out? And and the last question is, what types of industries are they working in, so that we can understand what's happening to students? And so what we can see here is sort of the graduation rates based on this one cohort of students. So once again, we selected a cohort of students and we followed them over time, several years. And what we do see is that the both category, once again, there's higher graduation rates across the board, whether it be 4, 5, or 6 years. AP only were a little bit lower than both, but a little bit higher than dual credit. And then dual credit only had higher graduation rates at both 4, 5, and 6 versus students who didn't receive any credit at all. So it does show you that there is this benefit associated with that. And keep in mind earlier when we talked about this is, we do see that African American and Hispanic students are more likely to take dual credit. And so I see this as sort of a moderator or a factor for success of how it's helping students of color succeed in college. And so we can clearly see the gaps that it's filling with the neither versus dual credit. And so these are the area of studies that students are graduating in. So when you look at the dual credit only, we see that several of them are going into, they received a degree in business, biology, human and liberal arts, health. And so it provides sort of that emphasis of what's happening. And then what we did is we followed them over time to see if they received any additional credentials. And what we see is that there very are few differences between AP only and dual credit only students who went back to school and received either an additional certificate or a graduate degree. So that's really exciting to see. There's a much higher rate there's a gap between those who did not have experiences versus those who had dual credit, and how it created this momentum points for them to receive additional credentials. And so this is the earnings by completion by student and type of degree. And so what I did was I created categories. So we had that both category that we've talked about of both dual credit and AP only, and dual credit only. But then what we also see is STEM degrees versus non-STEM. So science, technology, engineering, mathematics degrees versus non-STEM degrees. And this is sort of highlighting the bars are actually the earnings amounts that are taking place. And so we followed students over time, 1, 3, and 5 years out. And what you can see, I think what's interesting is, when you compare the both, remember both was positive for all factors, but with the earnings amount, they're the highest at the 5th year rate. But what we do see is that the dual credit students who received a STEM degree have the second highest earnings at year 5. And so, and once again, we know that there's systemic racism and biases when it comes to the amount of earnings taking place for students of color. And so what we're seeing here is that it's dual credit is sort of setting those momentums and providing them the skills and requirements needed to receive that STEM degree, and it's benefiting them with their earnings amount. I always think about families where they're sending students to us that maybe are making $30,000 for annual income. And what we can see is that by that 5th year for those STEM students who are dual credit only, it's doubling their entire household's income. That's a very powerful statement to really identify and sort of promote. It's fantastic to see. And keep in mind that when you look at the state of Texas, an individual median earnings, so half the individuals in Texas with a high school graduate or high school diploma make around $27,000. So we're seeing that we're really setting the stage, especially in those year 3 and year 5, where it's helping students succeed into the workforce. And so you might ask yourself, where are they going? What types of industries they're going into? So this is once again dual credit, both AP only, neither. What we see is the number of students going into educational services, which is K through 12, community college, and 4-year, we see a much higher rate of dual credit students going back and actually working in the K through 12 industry and giving back to their community. We also see a much higher rate for healthcare. So we see a much higher rate of nursing and other types of professions in the healthcare industry. And we frame them as sort of socially impactful jobs. So not only is dual credit providing them momentum points for success in college, but now you're going back and they're giving back to the community based on their occupation. So it's exciting to see that. And once again, this is year 3. There are very few differences. We see that dual credit students are more likely to be in educational services and healthcare compared to the other groups. And so once again, that just shows you the benefits of how they're giving back. And so concluding, I've given out a lot of numbers and a lot of information, but I think it's really an interesting story to talk about early college experiences and credit experiences, and how students have different decision points that they make. They have different perspectives that depends on the opportunities available, different major pathways, and then also the differences in quality and support that they receive at the local context. So, what is an advantage to one manifests as a disadvantage for another. And so this is sort of that yin and yang that we have to wrestle with. But ultimately, from my perspective, it creates this increased agency through choice. We're giving the flexibility and tailoring the experiences for students so that they believe that they are great college students, and then they can transition to a 4-year institution to succeed. So lastly, just thinking about moving past this conversation on whether dual credit benefits students during college, and knowing that it does. And now we can understand how we can customize that experience for all students so that they receive high quality experiences. And then my final thought is, dual credit, I love the theme of this conference with building bridges, but I want to take it to the next step. I think it builds bridges for students when they're transitioning from high school to college, but it also creates this college and career roadmap that can have a lasting impact on students' lives, their families' lives, and their community. So I want to pause here to see if there are any questions or comments.
Yes, we have some questions. And I may just, you might want to refer back to one of the charts.
Okay.
Dr. Troutman. So Jen Pines asks, does fourth fall drop because they graduate early? Graduate early because of credits that they took in with them? So in one of your charts towards the beginning, right? You have that.
I'm messing up again. Hang on one second. I can run statistics, but technology sometimes gets me. Okay, so it's right there. Okay, so let's see here. It's probably the quantitatives. I think they were getting that. Sorry, I don't want to make you dizzy. Okay, it's this one.
I think that one, yes.
Okay.
So that fourth fall drop, is that because they graduate early because of credits they took in with them?
So what we did with this analysis, that's a fantastic question, a methodological question. So when the student graduated, behind the scenes, we took them out of the equation because we view that as a success. So this is strictly focusing on students who are currently progressing towards that area. So there technically should be an additional metric of graduation, because we did see that some students graduate very quickly. The most extreme, we saw some students who had so many credit hours that they actually graduated within 3 semesters, which was amazing, and scratching my head, but that's a great question. So this fall is probably due to the types of students that are still going towards, and maybe it's the 1 to 15 hours that they brought with them and how it's closing that gap. But I think there further investigation needs to be done to really unpack that.
All right. Next question is mine, actually. Is on-ramps included in dual credit data? And for the follow-up study, can those credits be teased out? So I think when you did this study in 2018, I don't know that on-ramps was as prevalent across the state. We want to identify also the applicability of credits, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question as well. So on-ramps is not included in this data set. We felt that it's a alternative way to produce dual credit. It's not apples to apples. And so I think that in the next go around, what we'll do is what I want to do is I'll have dual credit, APIB, both, and on-ramps, because I think there will be differences.
Great. Another question, to get into professional programs, this is talking about the GPA slide. To get into professional programs, many require above a 3.0. How does their participation in dual credit impact their ability to get into post-baccalaureate programs? I know that more plays into this, but this is a concern.
That's a fantastic question. So I want to make sure I understand. So does dual credit create a momentum point so that they're going into MBA programs and other types of professional programs? Is that do you think?
So I think that in one of the slides, I guess average GPA was like 2.5, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So probably that is the question. That's the question relates to that slide.
Yes, it does.
I was reading your mind, Jane.
So, okay, so are these lower GPAs maybe impacting their success going towards a professional degree? So after a bachelor's degree or a professional degree as it relates to a business degree?
It would be business, law, medicine, etc. Because when you look at that, I used to work for UTEP, and I know that it was difficult for some students who came in, and I'm not talking about dual credit, I'm just talking about any student with a GPA that was significantly below a 3.0.
Absolutely. So I think what I need to do is further analyze the data that we'd already linked up to see, what happens to them, because we could slice it. Think about it as like a quintile. We could slice the data in a way to figure out what % of students who have a 3.0 or 3.5. Once again, this is the average. And keep in mind, this average also includes those students who have, a 0.00, because we did see some students that did not perform well and they didn't receive any credit, but they received Fs. So that might be lowering the median or the mean. But I think that's an excellent point to really figure out the journey of who's going on to get an MBA, a JD, and other types of degrees. I think that's fantastic.
And it also, I think, ties into, and we had in a previous session, Dr. Troutman, our friends from UTEP, who gave us some current data, and they quoted a 3.13 GPA for students who had dual credit under their belts. So again, I'm curious to see if these numbers have changed through, the last 3 years.
Yeah.
I believe we have a couple more questions. In the previous slide, number 7, do you have, Edith Aguirre asks, do you have any data on the percentage of dual credit AP students that earn higher than 1,600 in their SATs?
We do. Yeah, so in the report, we do slice the data. So look at the distribution across the SAT scores. One thing that when I'm struggling with, honestly, with the group is I'm trying to move away from SAT scores to do, you know what I mean? I'm trying to think of other measures that are holistic in nature that can really identify the success, the potential success of a student. I feel like we've taken SAT too far, and I think the pandemic has helped us recalibrate that, honestly. And so I'm actually I guess if you wanted to say there are some benefits from COVID, I would hate to say that, but I think that there are some things that how we can rethink how we're using academic scores to place a value judgment on students.
Yeah. Were you able to break down the data by region? And if not, is that something that you will do for your follow-ups?
We can. We did look at differences based on UTEP versus UT Dallas versus UT Austin versus UT RGV. So we can definitely do that. I think that's for that next phase of that study. I do want to start examining that, because one thing that we did do is really look at the policies and practices taking place by region, and El Paso is, let's say, miles ahead of other metropolitan areas when you're thinking about the pipeline and the pathway and the alignment. I mean, the El Paso Collaborative was such a shining star in what you've done over the last, I think it's like 30 years now. It's fantastic. And so I could see that just being sort of the gold standard that other people could, copy you as a flattering, as flattering. But it was so impressive to see the work of Natalicio and others that just really created this. And I love your title. You've created a bridge that it's showing opportunity and access for all, and I love that.
So in the last few years, for this conference, we've tried to bring keynote speakers who bring that either national or statewide perspective, because I think that it's a benefit that we are in our own region, but we're kind of isolated. And it's hard for us to really come to grips to, how good we are, what a great job we're doing, but we need to hear it from other people who see the big picture. So I do appreciate your words and definitely the work that you do. I believe that was all the questions. So please, I just want to remind everyone to complete the session evaluation, and want to thank you, Dr. Troutman, for the important information that you share and for the University of Texas System support of students in the far west region. And we look forward to seeing you here in El Paso when you do your follow-up study. And,
Absolutely. I look forward to working with you on that follow-up study. I think it's going to be crucial to have you be a key player in that. So thank you so much for offering me the time today, and thank you everyone for engaging with me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a great insights about workforce that we hadn't seen before. So thank you so much. So this concludes the 8th Annual Dual Credit Conference. Thank you all for your participation, and we'll see you next year.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.